Now.
Going live? Okay. Did you tag me? Tag me.
I did. We're live on Facebook. So, hello, everyone. I'm super stoked today because I have this beautiful guest that I want to present to you. Her name is Jonel Beauvais, and she's a powerhouse in many different ways, and we'll discover through this interview. But she's an incubator graduate, and I wanted her to share a little bit about her experience going through this 12-week process and sort of give people an insider's view about some of the soul processes we go through. So, first, Jonel, you're this amazing person, a huge contribution in your community. Tell us a little bit, first of all, where you are and what you're about. Who are you?
Oh, wow. Super loaded question. Okay. So, geographically, I am located in Akwesasne. It's the Mohawk territory to my community and my tribe. So, we are located right on the US Canadian political border. And so, we have the luxury of learning multiple ways of navigating that. But for the most part,
Are you on the US side?
so right now, yeah, my locator would say I was in the US side.
Okay.
But I like to really point that out sometimes because I think it gives people another picture of kind of the geographically where we're living and what that looks like.
Yes.
And I also wanted to share that when it comes to who I am still very much in the process of learning about myself. And I think what's really great about that is it feels good. So a lot of times I've had to learn things through adversity, through being indigenous, through being a woman, through being through hardships and fortitude. But I've arrived at this place in my motherhood and in different places where I feel like I'm growing in areas that I have yet to see. So I think that's really exciting. And then the layers to that are just like I love being in my community. I love listening. There's a lot of places that need attention, that need nurturing, that need someone to listen and hear. And for the most part, just being engaged in the community through culture, especially through being an advocate around sexual assault and domestic violence, violence in general. It has taught me a lot. It's broke me down. It's built me back up, which is what we hope most things do to us, right? But for the most part, I was really just trying to, I think, explore something that wasn't so damaging when it came to sexuality and sex. And so your book and your words and everything you had to share came at a really great time in my life. And I really want to thank you for that, Julie, because it was really good work that you did.
Awesome. Well, before we dive into those kind of particularities, I would love to hear from your perspective. Why do you think it's really important in this day and age to take on the question of sex and intimacy? Why is it such an important theme to lean into for people?
Well, I think living and having witnessed a lot of adversity and violence, you see that the other spectrum to that has a lot to do with intimacy. And so when we talk about healing, when we talk about mending, when we talk about finding things that we've lost, that all has to do with intimacy. They're all relationships, relationships with self, relationships with people, sexually, friendships, family. And so I think that part of culture has really misconstrued all of that. And so we only find ourselves arriving at these really overly sexualized places, or they're places of shame, they're places of devastation.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about intimacy and when we talk about creating more space for that, I believe that this book is necessary because at this time, there are so many people deprived of that kind of intimacy. And so if we can just wake up to it, it's actually not something that we don't possess. We all possess the ability to be intimate. It's
Mm,
just whether or not you're carrying the capacity or the tools that you need to get there. And it's scary, right? It takes courage to be intimate. It takes a lot of pushing the boundaries and challenging yourself. And you're probably going to end up hurt, because that's what happens when we take a leap of faith and we have feelings and all of those different types of things. So I think that for the most part, we can always land on some common ground. And the common ground has a lot to do with being a human being. And
yeah,
being a human being entails feeling, and it entails connectedness. And it also lets us know that we were from the beginning set up to succeed. And that's why there's other human beings. And that's why we find nurturing and warmth in certain places. And so I just think that's a really beautiful thing. And I'm sure we could go into to galactic realms with all of this, and we should, right? At some point we should. But when you write that book, Julie, we'll get to that part. But um, or when we write it, we'll write it together.
yeah,
So for the most part, yeah. So I think that, finding safe places, especially books, have always been safe places for us to learn and to generate our thoughts and to go into our own personal worlds. That this level of navigation through the hard aspects of sexuality, and then also these really great liberating orgasmic places, everyone should know the totality of
right,
that and
right.
have access to it.
Yeah. Well, I really love what you're bringing into in terms of like the way a lot of us have grown up has disrupted our sense for intimacy and or someone who has been in a situation that, dulled us down or broke us in some way or learned to shut us down in different ways. It's like such a learning curve to go into that intimacy part because it really makes us stretch and feel vulnerable and naked and so yeah, I love how you bring this piece of like, how does sexuality get to that place where we're all striving for that real nourishment of intimacy. So that's a huge activist, kind of pursuit, like allowing people to experience the true nurturance and beauty of intimacy when everything around them seems to tell them the opposite, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's a really dark place to be in, when we've totally lost our sense of self-acceptance, and we're trying to figure out what's normal or what's not normal, or trying to somehow fit into a space that really isn't made for us. And
Yeah, yeah.
so it's
Yeah, and like sometimes our lives have, betrayed us in all kinds of different ways and we end up alone. And that sense of like there's that resilience that it takes to turn around and like reclaim these pieces that seem like have completely vanished from our lives, right?
Yeah, and they do, right? And so that's, I think, what's great about the book is you're able to identify where it's traveled to, because if I've experienced sexual molestation as a child, and knowing that my body still carries that memory in some shape or form, and then saying, oh wow, like understanding where that's actually showed up in my life 30 years down the road, I think is really important. It's interesting, and I think if you can really find a place of non-judgmental um, um, dialogue or support, that's probably the most effective thing, because I think we get to hold ourselves in a place of understanding and grace more often than that. But actually, the other side to that is how much damage we will do to ourselves because of something we had no control over.
Right. Can you give a little example of that just to bring us into reality with
Oh,
what that would mean?
absolutely. Absolutely. I can tell you, more often than not, I find that I would say about 90 to 95% of the times, people who are on the receiving end of violence will place some shame or guilt on themselves, or feel responsible for the
Mhm.
harm that's been caused to them.
Yeah.
And I think that for the most part, when it comes to advocacy, you're really trying to get in there close enough, not only to provide like protection and resource, but also to let them know that, 6 months from now, you don't have to, harm yourself anymore. You don't
Keep
have
that
to be.
perpetuation of that harm.
Right, yes, and
So
so we're
true.
self-mutilators, right? We
Yeah,
self-mutilate, we
yeah,
self-destruct, we do
yeah,
all of this, and I
yeah,
think that's really the most that's the biggest tragedy.
yeah. What's so interesting because this, I once one of my mentors shared with me that, we have this energy body, and let's say someone gets bullied or something, and it's like if they get a punch in their energy body, and the energy body becomes like this big dent. So until you don't heal that big dent, you keep on calling in and repeating these patterns of attracting those things in, and like you say, continuing the work of that self mutilation or that self sabotaging or self
Mm.
hurt because of that blast that came at you. So it really takes something to take that and refill out that space so you can fully, be integral again, right? And attract better, nourishing, fulfilling relationships after that.
Yeah, for sure. I think for the most part, there's a lot of different ways to look at things, and for me, the most, I guess, of productive way was in through culture and spirituality. I was just able to arrive at so much more greater depths of understanding through those spaces than I was just logically trying to figure everything out. And so I
Yeah.
think that's really hard to figure out the issue through your mind when it's actually in your heart and in your spirit.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so
Yeah,
I,
I
I
really love that you say that because that's one of the things I feel that we really, have to take on this intellect and this ego and sort of move it aside a little bit so that we can go in and dive into what's actually living. So that's part of one of the missions actually in the incubators. It's really cool that you say that. I see that behind you. I see the little red and green little bookie there.
yeah. Oh, this book
Um,
right here.
that little book there. Tell me, like, as an Indigenous woman that went through this process, like, what was the chapter that you were like, oh, this really speaks to me? Or maybe there was a few, but like, what were some of those aha moments?
I think that I needed every word of the book. And I truly mean that. Like I really, and wherever I was at that day or that week or wherever I wasn't, for whatever reasons, working in sexual violence so much, like I knew that I had to find some kind of higher place with this. And I knew how much psychologically it was wearing on me, how much it weared on other people. So with the book, I actually found, I remember the night I was reading about um, being incapacitated, intoxication, and sex. And I was really blown away by the pieces around choosing to leave our body, especially walking into something so intimate and so powerful. And
Mm,
I was really like, whoa, 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 like, wait a minute. Let me like really sit in that. And I thought about all the times, especially younger, walking into sexuality and not knowing how to do that, right? And it's just this really common thing. Like, it's really common knowledge that people drink or do take other things to feel relaxed or to feel more comfortable, or they're used right to control and manipulate people. And so, for the most part, I really loved how you were able to find the balance in leaning in to some of to some of the reality of the harm that can cause, and then also lean into, like, for some people, for wherever they're at, it actually helps and enhances an experience for them. And so you kind of really left it up for people to say, hey, that's me and that's me, and maybe
mhm,
I don't have to be on either line of this. I can just be like a part of something that I've experienced or can relate to. And so I think, and especially just, yeah, at the time. So I don't know. I was like, I had underlined this really great piece that you had wrote about sexual energy showing up in your life. And I think we can all kind of at some point realize, like, when our bodies start like wanting to be stimulated, or we started like, whoa, like my body's growing and I have this and I have attention and I have like all these really great sensational things, but I have no idea what to do with them. And I
Yeah.
think that it's in those moments I was like, oh, I wish I could have just helped bundled myself up a little bit tighter, because I literally just went like,
Right. Right.
and actually had to do a lot of years of healing, because there was no real solid support during that time.
Yeah. Well, I really love what you said about how being working, like you've experienced all kind of things in your life, but as well, you do advocacy work with all these people, and it can really be heavy sometimes. And, we need to build these imaginations of like sex is not just, something negative, that it's also something that is beautiful. And so to keep this imagination really full, like really naming all the places where it does hurt us, the circumstances and the conditions and the little the dynamics that need to be flagged and spoken about because there's something off about them, or they hurt us, or fragment us, as I say in the book. But to also start seeing how this also builds us, and to keep this imagination, so when someone has been hurt, that there's this picture of like what that person can live into to heal, where they can go, what kind of intimacy can they access, what kind of physical sensations can they allow into their bodies after feeling hurt. It's like, how do you reopen, how do you get to that place where you bring in the good stuff? So I love it how, yeah, you're like, oh well, being in this kind of hardship place, it really is actually really important to build up this bigger image for myself and for other people, so that we can actually bring and elevate people out of whatever hardship they're in, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Imagination is the antidote to trauma.
Right.
Because a lot of times with trauma, like, we can't see past the uncomfortable feeling, we can't see past the hard conversation or the anger. There's rage in there, there's really powerful sources of emotion that can like totally overwhelm us, and just we can be hesitant to walk into that, and that's okay. That's all right, but for the most part, you're right, imagination has a lot to do with us overcoming that darkness, because that's actually the light after the darkness. And so I think that for the most part, like you were mentioning, the fragmented pieces of it all, and us piecing ourselves back together is really vital in order for us to say, oh, the shame. So the shame is so isolating. And
Yeah.
so walking into a room full of people that can also identify with shame, or also recognize the harm and the embarrassment of what our bodies have done, or what people have done to our bodies, or what we've done with our bodies, there is, I think, no greater place of a safe haven than to be with other human beings that say, I know that pain, and you're not alone in that. And this is what I thought about it. And for a moment in that, you're like freedom, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
freedom. Like,
Recognition.
yeah, like, this isn't just me.
Yeah.
It
It's
affects me,
me.
but it isn't just me. And so that's what's really nice about walking through the book with the incubator with other individuals, internationally, was the fact that we got to really explore different spectrums of where people. I know that group knew I was holding a lot of lower continuum sexual, like, I just had this really like rigid, and I couldn't get out of it. And I knew that I had to. And so I needed to be acquainted with other people that either look like me or don't look like me, and say, hey, that's right. That's real. Or I can at least empathize
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's really well said. And like when you talked about the rage and the different feelings that come up when you're healing, like that's what I think is really a beautiful space, is that we can have space to identify and talk about all the spectrum, like shame. Shame is this isolating thing; it puts you in a prison. And then to be able to name it, it's like, it's like the door key that opens up that lock, and you're like, walk out, like, oh, I don't have to be here anymore, So it's like this kind of the soul is a poetic space, right? And we need to be able to go into the poetics of it express those different emotions, put them in images, allow them to live and exist, so that, and have other people see them and share and hear other people's words and be like, oh, whoa, like those words really spoke. It's almost like we, working at this kind of soul level with the poetics, allow us to get out of the head part and more into that experience, and not judging it. We're not judging it for good or bad. We're just like, this is what happened. This is what this is what the complex feelings were. Like, it was just, there's so many things usually going on at the same time, right? So being able to have space for that. Um, so yeah, just to put it in context for people, whoever doesn't really know how this works, is that it's a 12-week process, and every week there's one chapter that we take on from the Sex Up Your Life book. So we go across this continuum of connection, from completely disconnected, fragmenting, hurtful situations that break us away from intimacy, away from our body, all the way up to the most intimate, most connected, most embodied experience of sexuality. And so we kind of go through this process of going deeper and deeper and deeper, and finding those places, and this process of like gathering those pieces that we didn't remember we had in ourselves, and to bring them back into our presence so that we can honor them and also let them go, right? So I would love to hear, Jonel, like, what was that 12-week process like for you, like going through those different weeks?
I I think I just flopped myself into it, right? So we're so busy and we're like, okay, this is coming. And I just like, flop, here I am, right? Okay, here's the book I'm reading. And I found myself really being able to wrap my mind around things that I couldn't quite. So that's why I think I really enjoyed the way you were able to articulate a lot of the subjects and the chapters and the issues. And at first, like we start out on the lower end of things, which is what I was living in anyway. So I was like, okay, here's more violence, and I was kind of like, but I knew that we were going to work to higher grounds, and I found myself not feeling so. I guess I was noticing I had this pattern, especially when I'm at home and I'm being intimate with my own partner, or all of a sudden it was like some kind of awareness kicked in, and I was like noticing how much maybe I was projecting my own issues about sexuality onto my children. As much as I think I'm like educating them, maybe I am shaming them in that process, or maybe they are my own insecurities. Because I guess when you're reading this book, you really got to look at it from where you're at in your life, because I'm coming at you like a mother of teenagers. So you already know I'm like, sexual, how this, like, talk about that. We gotta work through it, because I know how damaging it can be if I don't. So anyways, aside from my children, and even, with my partner, right, trying to figure out, like, did I have walls up with him? Was I pushing him away? Oh, you are. You have. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I don't want to do that. That's not what I want. And so I started, like, trying to, I think, be a little bit more vulnerable, and not even realizing that I wasn't being just hard all the time, right? Like da 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 da, and so that was really nice. So I was able to find myself having more enriching, intimate experiences with my partner. Not that they weren't, but I think that I had to put down some things that weren't mine in order to get there, and then realize how much control I really did have in the process of wanting to just be present in that moment, and not think, and not just think of other things that didn't need to be in there, and which obviously puts the wall up.
Yeah.
So, for the most part, and then what happened was, is I ended up falling in love with him a little bit more. He doesn't even know what's going on. He has no idea what is going on right now. And so then I realized, like, wow, like, look how patient he's been with me. He's never like, never, I think, I felt judged, or felt like pressured, or felt anything. It's like, wherever I am, I'm okay. And whether that benefits him or whether it doesn't benefit him, he's still okay. And so I don't feel responsible for him, but I did feel like I needed to give my partner a little bit more than what I had been. And I know he appreciated it.
That is good. Well, I wanted the audience to hear some of the work that you created, just to bring it more into reality. So maybe we'll just describe a little bit. Maybe you can describe kind of what the creative process has been, to access all these parts of yourself. And then maybe you can share some of those works that kind of captured the beauty of your work and your words.
So yeah, I've been talking for quite some time now. I mean, literally like a good, probably like, I think I've been talking nonstop for about 6 years. And I, practicing, strengthening that public speaking, wanting to be articulate, listening to other people. And all of a sudden I had arrived back to this place of writing. And you really helped me out with that. I'm telling you, on like woman to woman, I truly embraced your thought process around all of this. And so in writing these pieces and actually having the time, so I was kind of like practicing on like, okay, can you, like, how prepared can you be if someone asks you something? Are you ready? Do you have the answer? Do you have a response? And I found that with writing I had 100% control about what I wanted to be said, how deep I wanted to go, how funny I wanted to be, how serious. And it really took time to do that. And obviously, post pandemic, I did not create the time for that, but I also didn't have the time for that. And so I think just acknowledging both of those pieces, having time, sitting down, um and I'm slow. Like I really take my time because I want it to be good, right? Like, and so anyway, so I was able, I wrote a ton of things down, and there probably should be about 5 more volumes of this journal that that really needs some more investigating.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to share a couple pieces. And so I found there always was a really poetic side to me ever since I was little. I remember being young and wanting to write poetry, and I did. Some point that stops, right? At some point my creativeness stops, and I run into adulthood and I forget all about having fun. I forget all about wanting to play, and it's just be responsible, and then not be so responsible, and the consequences of that. So anyways, I wanted to share, there was a night, this was August 5th, and you had asked us the state of my body right now, and I had written, I am light, I am my own offering, I'm loving myself through this journey, I'm in places where I'm in control. I am the best. I am the beat of my own heart. I'm better. I'm cleaner. I'm wiser, validated by my higher self. I am a cheerleader to my younger self, open to the vastness of medicine and possibility. I am fertile to my own creativity. My home is safe with me.
Hmm. Wow, I love that last line. Beautiful.
Yeah, I think that was my first time actually reading that out loud, but I had slipped it. I was in the car, remember? I was like in the car writing all that, and I had a separate piece of paper and I found it.
Yeah, so we have all these different prompts during the session where we kind of go in and tap in. So this, we often do this part where we connect with our bodies to see what actually is living inside the body. So yeah, do you have any other pieces you'd like to share with us?
I do. I wrote this really juicy piece around sex, and everybody seems to really like it. So I'm just gonna share that with everyone.
On what night was that one?
I did not write the date. Actually, wait, did I? Let me see. What this was, I did September 23rd, I believe. It says chapter 9, and we had what's in your heart. Um, what time was I really here? Okay, it might have been the following week because we're a couple pages out. But I wanted to share with everyone this piece around sensual sexuality for me, because there's really no other place that I would really work on this unless it was deliberately in this book. And there was no other really um area in my life that I probably would go here. So I just wanted to say that this felt really good to embrace sexuality and not have any interrupted thoughts about violence in it.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, I know I really built out a lot of momentum for this, but I wrote, he will never wonder how it feels, or he will never wonder how I feel because I'll show him. Aroused by the submission of my dominance, thrilled by my wetness, honored by my hands, clenched by my legs, sensation overload with my tongue. He will never wonder how I feel because I'll show him how it feels to be with me. It's smooth, it's rough, it's sweet and moist. It's give and it's take. It's the fall and the rise of temptation and the gratification of being present with a woman who makes medicine with love.
Wow, we gotta let that sink in. It's so beautiful. I love give and take and this whole rhythm. That's one thing that was so beautiful with your work. It was always so rhythmic and so you'd always feel the heart and the power in everything you wrote. I would just like sit here for like 10 minutes listening to all your pieces. Do you have one more? Can we like pull one more piece from you?
Piece. Well, I thought the drip poems were pretty interesting. Actually, talk about getting your mind to like really weave in, right? And I kind of real that's probably how I think in general, like a drip poem, because there's just all this random stuff happening. Um,
Yeah,
but
these techniques I use to help people get out of their rational mind and have to just get in the flow of meeting these different words and have to incorporate with stream of consciousness kind of thing. And it always got people to create this most amazing poetry and the most amazing work. So yeah, once I discovered how powerful it was, I just kept on doing them every session. I just felt they were such good warm up to getting access to that soul space, you know?
yeah, they are. And it's really interesting how some weeks you're like, it's just there. It's just you don't even have to work on it. It's just there. And then there was other weeks where I was like, wow, I've just wasted like a precious 25 seconds trying to think about how to, but and I'm like, I only got two sentences down.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so interesting how, that some really reveals something about the human condition, that when we're open, inspiration comes in. It's all there, you just because sometimes we would do these things and we would do this drip poem and by the end of it there's these masterpieces that are not even edited, They're just coming through. And if we understood that about our human condition, that there's this access to beauty and poetry and creative spark and to inspiration, that it's all there. You just need to open the door. But sometimes open the door is not always easy, right? Like you say, that little bulldog can be there like, no, but that's not the right word.
Yeah, well, there's a really big push right now for, I think, a lot of people to learn the practice of presence.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think writing always helps you be present to the moment that you have. And it's really the only thing we ever really have is the moment in time, because we don't have 10 minutes ago. We might not have 10 minutes from now, but we have this moment. And so sometimes I think arriving back here and being present to that is probably a superpower that will
It,
always call us. It will always call us because that's actually where we get to feel, I think, hopefully, some peace.
yeah, yeah. And it's like you say, it's a superpower that we can learn to tap into more and more and more and make that almost like a highway of information if we allow it to be, right?
Yeah. I just like, I don't know. I didn't fully read through anything, but I have a piece here and we're just gonna, there's lots of scribbles and things X'd out, but I'm gonna try and read through it.
Okay, go for it.
It says, "What's in your heart?" September 23rd, chapter 9. My heart is home. I feel I have tried to rest all the scariest of places and not even knowing how lost hearts attract vampires. But through the disruption of a natural disaster, we found a clearing to the perfect setting where the birds sing and the moon glows, where all things could be their bare bone selves, and that there was this secret to being luminous in love. We are rising to higher grounds and have arrived at a place called home, the place that's always inside of us. So we always know so we always find our way back.
Love it. So, why do you think, in your experience, why are words and accessing the soul space like that? Why is that healing?
Well, it's extremely healing, I think, for me as an individual, because part of communication says that I have a body and I have a voice inside my voice and in my heart and in my head. And I'm usually like battling the two, or actually they're working together some days. And so I get to vocally let that out. And I think having a little bit of experience with chakras and identifying with this, like wanting to say something and I couldn't, wanting to stand up for myself and I couldn't, wanting to tell somebody how I really felt and I couldn't. I think being upset about that really helped me lean into it a little bit more. And so I think that part of finding words, finding ways to express who and what and where I am have been extremely validating
Mm,
for me. And so it's just really nice to arrive at this place in life where you can even learn to sit in your pain, not so much sit in your, but like sit in your discomfort and be like, wow, this is grief. This is betrayal.
mm,
This is uh some kind of misconduct. Like I've learned to try to not run. It's still instinctual for me to run, but I've just through words and through different skill building and influence, life has given me a lot of opportunity to show up. And this book is just many forms for me to be able to show up for myself. I didn't have to be anything to anybody on this call. I just had to make sure I was telling you how I felt and
mhm.
um, what what I wanted. I think a little bit more for myself.
Well, I love that you bring in this whole piece around the voice, and I think we don't understand how much it affects our life if we don't have a voice. You know, it affects all our sexual experiences. It
Mm,
affects what we accept, what we don't accept. It navigates us in like what kind of behavior is allowed in our life and what's not allowed. It's the vehicle for communication, of building something different, of sharing yourself, and it's like the vehicle to intimacy. There's physical intimacy, but there's being able to open up your heart and speak your truth. And when that's been taken away or hurt or shit on or, punched at and mocked and ridiculed, um, you lose this fundamental captain of this big train, and it goes haywire and is like a train is just like falling off the tracks because that voice is really what allows us to go forward to build something that's good and solid. So I love how you really honored the voice. Like I've been thinking a lot about that, and it's one of the pieces of healing that I feel we're focusing on in this incubator is that so many people have um, an affected relationship with their expression. Maybe they're people pleasers. Maybe there's so many different places where this twisted quality about self-expression comes out, and then it shows up in our lives in such impactful ways. And when we can start expressing and get that movement, get that voice used to sharing the truth, sharing the poetics, sharing the complexities. It doesn't have to be, and it doesn't have to be sometimes in a lot of personal development things. I see we have these formulas like, well, I'm going to say in this formula and then it's going to bring me to this. It's like, no, the soul space and the soul scape is so much richer. We have to learn to tap into it to express that, you know? And I think that's when we start living soulful lives and we start allowing things to happen like we really want them to happen. So thank you for like really bringing that piece around voice because yeah, I'm just really even in my own life knowing that that was a key thing. It's a key thing in terms of turning my bad experiences around. It's like the voice, being able to connect with the heart, connect with the power, connect with the sexuality and sensuality, connect with the safety, everything connected so the voice speaks in such a powerful way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is probably the biggest way we bring justice to ourselves.
Ooh, that's good. We're gonna quote that one. Jonel Beauvais, the
Put
voice
it
is probably the biggest way you bring justice to yourself. Bam. By the way, Janelle is going to be writing an amazing book. She has so much substance. You are going to be seeing her name soon. She's an amazing human being. I'm all back and back of her. Like she's just brilliant, and I'm excited for what's coming for her. Um, just to complete, Janelle, why do you think someone should join the incubator? Like, what? Why do you think it's relevant to someone's life?
Well, I wanted to say that I was able to get into the incubator because I had a sister who goes out, does her own work, was able to network, and initiated an opportunity for others, right, to apply for this. And she probably knew, right, knowing me, knowing other women, indigenous women, that we really needed spaces to talk about this. And so I think what was also really intriguing was to have other indigenous people on the call as well as non-indigenous, because we need diversity. Diversity is
Absolutely.
and so I um I was really drowning in a lot of this sexual violence. I was hurting bad. I was hurting for other people. I was frustrated with the mentality. I was trying to figure out, how do we take down all of this horrific social media stuff, and how do we get people to stop thinking, like, just about their um likes and reactions.
Like that
Um,
superficial level of interacting.
Yeah, but then also wanting to support them, like, if you felt good about your body, I want you to feel good about your body, but I don't want anybody else having any perverted thoughts about your body. And I think that just comes as being a mother, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
seeing that culture, seeing what it does, and just not trying to feel anybody to feel more shame about it, but just be like, oh, like, just there's find your balance. So anyways,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to get about other people. I am trying to get about me. But the importance of the incubator, I think for myself and everyone on there, was the good, um, I think, basic principles of solidarity and unification, that when a group of people come together, they can create a fire, and they can tend to that fire, and they can decide if they want to stay in it or come a little closer or listen or share. And you just did a really wonderful job at helping us navigate through some of those emotional days and those really hard hiccups that can come up. And so I just appreciated the group taking me as I was, because I wasn't always like showing up as Janelle who has answers or whatever. I very much showed up on days where I was heartbroken. I was depleted. I was hurting beyond measure. And I still tried to show up in some way. And there were some nights I couldn't. But for the most part, I think everyone should have access to these types of places because they can really help disintegrate a lot of the false beliefs around who we are and what happened and why, and to really restore the worth that needs its debt paid, right? And so we're always going back to worth and what feels good and what feels right. And so I actually truly believe, Julie, we should be having these a lot sooner in our personal development, right? So I don't know exactly when and where sexuality became, whatever, but it has. And so I genuinely feel like, especially teenagers, right? Or even just before then, we should really be having more conversations about what what um what intimacy should really feel like, because we kind of have a thought about it, but once you feel it, that feeling, and that becomes your lighthouse. You're like, oh, if this doesn't feel like that, then this isn't intimacy, this is something else. And
Mm.
so I just really appreciate there was some guidelines, there was a nice little guardrail for us to stay within, not a box, but just to say, like, let's try and stay on route here. And I loved listening to other people's creativity. Like,
Yeah,
that's even more satisfying
it's
than
so
listening
true.
to your own stuff, because that, like, our people in there were like, some nights I was just like, what?
I know.
Like, say that again? Like,
I know,
what?
like the spark, like seeing
So,
the human spark
oh,
through other people is just like so exciting.
it was, especially from men. I
Yeah,
really appreciated hearing men on this call,
yeah,
seeing men on this call. And I was like, wow, like, good for you. Like, it gave me this little glimpse about what sexuality can look like in healthier men. And
yes,
I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that like nobody's business,
yes.
because it said, hey, this isn't all there is. You have something else to work with here. And we all like knowing that there's something else we weren't expecting coming down the line to help us out. And those men definitely did that.
Yeah, I really love having men in the group too. Like it's so healing for the women, it's so healing for the men, and to hear them for the men to hear the women, and even like the different genders, hearing their different experiences. It's just like it's just so heart opening, right? It's just so inspiring, and so it just takes off our guards. Like we're like, oh, like that's your soul expression. It's just wow, that's you, and it doesn't have to be exactly the same as me. I know sometimes we sometimes go in with sexuality like this is how sexuality should be for everyone. And you have to let go at one point and realize like we're creative beings. So like that person expresses their fire this way and that person has to express it that way. And it's like and this is where they're at in their life, in their journey. So it's this really cool thing where you start getting different perspectives. And I love that about the incubator, having different people with different backgrounds and different vista points. So yeah, I think that's part of the success is bringing in all these different points of views. It just makes for an amazing experience.
You
Yeah.
know what? You're right. As you're talking, I was just thinking, like, wow, these men have really been depriving themselves of really truly being free sexually, because I found that when they were expressing themselves in that way, it was like this really like this pristine place of like, wow, so like, where's all this romance at, right? Where are you living fully? And because so much violence is insinuated from them, I can only imagine what it would look like or feel for them to have this shock of like, wait a minute, like, I'm not just this like heterosexual toxic masculine male who needs to exert my power and send all over everything, like, and that's not always the case. I guess I'm being a little bit dramatic there, but for the most part, sometimes, like, if that's all you see, you think that's all you should be.
Yeah, and it's beautiful to sort of open up the possibilities, right? And the possibilities of experiences and opening up the heart and the soul and like just realizing like we're it's not this one layered experience, not just this one dimensional thing. It's like there's so many layers, and to be able to embrace that and behold that together and discover it in each other's pieces, like there's nothing like hearing different people express to create this tapestry where you're like, oh, I have an even more complex and nuanced understanding of sexuality. Because as you say, we get these very monolithic experience of what sexuality is, and then we see it as it expressed in what people care about, what's hurting people. We just see it in such much more complex ways, and that's really exciting for me.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. The whole thing's exciting. Like Julie, I'm telling you, you wrote a really great piece of work, and I hope it takes you everywhere where it's meant to, and I hope it shows up in the lives of those who really need it because we really do. And I just wanted to really give a shout out to my group for embracing me and for trusting me and for having all of that we created intentionally, unintentionally, and to Michelle Shenandoah for really taking the initiative to, create possibility for people. And then it goes to show like when women networking with women and, all of those barriers, when, once we can learn how to jump over them suckers, we're actually like making some moves here. And like yeah, like your piece even on cultural, right, the cultural piece, like the violence against indigenous women with missing and murdered, and with other women of color was I thought really impeccable, considering it was another narrative written by a non-indigenous person, but your ability to smash all of that and just really come from this pure, authentic, transparent place was really a good, nice cup of strawberry drink, because more
Ooh, I
often
love
than
that.
like not liking that tea, right? But I just really wanted to, point that out to you, that that's nice, and that shows growth, right? That shows that we're not just stuck, right? Blaming each other or keeping distance. Actually, we're getting closer to where those solutions really are. And
Yeah,
so
like
yeah.
building those bridges and of understanding and of acknowledging each other and seeing each other and the complexity of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just women honoring women in general is always going to be a good tradition to carry on. And so I'm just glad that those things still happen today and we get to witness them, because I'm doing things my grandmother would couldn't imagine doing. I'm sure you're doing things your grandmother couldn't imagine you doing. And so I
Yeah,
think
good point.
yeah, we are showing up like the granddaughters of all granddaughters, because
I'm not
we're
sure my grandmother yet knows that I really wrote a book about sex. She's going to be
I'm
turning 100 years old this December.
Julie, you need to go and read this book to her. And I'm telling you, she is probably more wild and free than you have ever seen her in her whole entire life.
I
At
love
90
it.
years old, there's no more, like, it's over,
Okay,
right? There's
I'm,
nothing left to hide.
I'm going to tell my mom to leave a copy at her in her home. I've told her I wrote a book, and I just sent her actually a short story I wrote where there's some sexual content in it. But yeah, no, thank you for reminding me. It's like I know my other grandmother who's just crossed the threshold this March or this May. She was so excited about my book. She really understood the importance of talking about sexuality, um, because she had a very difficult marriage and she it was probably sexless for most part of it. So I think she really knew like this is something that needs to be talked about, or else, and she was in a very toxic relationship. So how do we dismantle these toxic relationships to allow for like a soulful, loving, supportive, powerful, relationship where there's that fire that is tended to, right? So yeah, okay. Well, I feel like we did a really good journey here together. Is there any final words that you'd like to say?
Yes, I would love to take this moment and encourage everyone who has the opportunity or has even listened to us for this long, to really just, if you're feeling in any which way there's a pull toward this or there's some curiosity around it, I invite you to give yourself some permission uh, to take this journey into sexuality, because it's probably showing up like 100% of the time in your life and not being really all that aware of it because you've been denied this kind of education. You haven't had access to it. You haven't had spaces that were deliberately and sincerely created for you to feel heard or seen or creative or whatever you need to be. And so, I really just want to honor you, Julie, for your work, for your experience, for everything that's hurt you, and for everything that's made you better. Because here you are, you've left something for us all to be able to roll around in and wrestle, and at the same time, walk back into some really important moments a little bit more real than we were before. And I think that's really a great gift that you've given the world, that you've given to all of us. And I'm extremely proud of you. I'm extremely proud to have met women like you, and for being so gentle and for carrying us all in the way that you have. Thank you for doing that work. And let's just see what happens. And yes, maybe one day, when I release my own book, we'll have a nice dual book signing together, and we'll take some pictures and eat some cheesecake and laugh it up.
And I'm there for you if you need any help. I love that you're going to be making this amazing book, and I think you're going to be talking about intimacy, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Is there anything else to talk about? Because I really don't want to talk
Exactly.
about.
You're my kind of lady. Okay, well, thank you so much for taking this time and for touching the hearts of all that are listening. Just hearing your voice, because you have such a powerful um, voice as well, informed by all the different moments in your life that were painful, and you've had to dig into this resilience, and you've been this powerful force. I'm gonna have to do another podcast on you, on your story. I think we actually have to do another story on your story, and like what you went through this kind of process of downward spiral, and you were able to turn that. And I would love to interview actually. So let's set that up another time. So thank you for everything, Jonel, and thank you for everyone listening to us. Exactly like you said, thank you for listening to us to the end. You got here, you're good. Okay, well, love you lots, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, much light and love to everybody. Thank you, Julie.